My husband extended his service for 6 more years without telling me, then blew the re-enlistment bonus on jewelry for another woman. When I confronted him at the FRG Christmas party, he called me hysterical and said, "You knew what you were signing up for." I just looked at him. That was 8 months ago. This morning, he stood outside my house in tears. My mother was the textbook military spouse. She could box up a whole house in 48 hours, make friends at a new base within a week, and somehow kept 3 kids fed, clothed, and in school through 8 moves. She ran every FRG meeting while Dad was deployed, organized care packages for the entire unit, and never missed sending his favorite beef jerky even when money was tight. She was the person other spouses called at 3 a.m. when they couldn't take another night alone. Dad was nearing his 20-year mark, and Mom had been preparing for that moment since deployment number 3. She saved every penny, researched real estate in Colorado near her sister, even chose the exact house with the wraparound porch. "Just 1 more year," she kept saying. "Then we can finally put down roots, have a real home. The kids can finish high school in one place." The re-enlistment ceremony was supposed to be next Tuesday. Mom thought it was his retirement ceremony. She'd invited her whole family from Colorado, bought a new dress. She even made a photo album of all our moves titled "The Journey to Home." I helped her glue in every picture. There was one of her crying in the driveway of our first base house, pregnant with me. Another of her painting my sister's room for the 4th time in a different place. She'd written little notes under each photo, things like, "Move number 3, left behind the garden I planted," and "Move number 6, Tommy's best friend stayed here." But here's what no one knew. Dad had already re-enlisted 3 months earlier, signed up for another 6 years without saying a word. And that wasn't even the worst part. Mom found out at the FRG Christmas party. We were all there, the whole battalion family scene. Kids running around with cookies, some colonel's wife talking about resilience or whatever. Mom was serving punch when she overheard 2 lieutenants' wives whispering near the dessert table. "Did you see Major Wilson with Captain Brooks at the PX yesterday? They weren't even trying to hide it." The other one laughed. 20 years his wife's been waiting, and he's spending his re-enlistment bonus on jewelry for another woman. Mom's hand froze on the ladle. I watched. Her face changed slowly, like watching ice form on glass. She set down the punch, crossed the community center, and stood in front of Dad. He was laughing with some other officers by the Christmas tree. "Is it true?" That's all she said. Quiet. The conversations around them stopped. Dad's face did that thing where he tried to look confused. "Honey, what are you—" "The re-enlistment. Captain Brooks, is it true?" The whole room went silent. Even the kids stopped running. You could hear crappy Christmas music playing from someone's phone. Dad straightened his uniform, looked her in the eye. "We should discuss this at home." Mom laughed. Not a real laugh, the kind that makes your skin crawl. 20 years I've waited for you to come home, really come home, not just between deployments, not just for a weekend. Home. Her voice rose. "I've been the married single mother. I've been the mover, the packer, the keeper of everything while you played soldier, and you couldn't even tell me you signed away 6 more years of my life." Some colonel tried to step in, saying something about maintaining decorum. Mom turned on him. "Decorum? Where was decorum when I was in labor with our 2nd child and he was in Iraq? Where was decorum when I had to explain to our son why his dad missed his high school graduation for a training exercise?" She turned back to Dad. "Really? She's 23. Dad's jaw tightened. "Linda, you're being hysterical. This is what military wives do. You knew what you signed up for. Maybe if you understood sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Mom pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "Let me tell you about sacrifice. I have 4,000 photos on this phone. You're in 217. I know because I counted. I counted while you were deployed again." She tossed the phone against his chest. It bounced off his medals. "I sacrificed my career, my family, my friends, my sanity, my children's stability, everything. For what? So you could your coworker and sign up for more years without asking? You're embarrassing yourself." Dad said, picking up her phone from the floor, and me in front of my command. Mom nodded slowly. You're right. I am embarrassing myself by believing for 20 years this would end, that I mattered as much as your precious career. She looked around at the other wives. Some were crying, most stared. How many of you are waiting for retirement too? How many think it'll be different at 20? No one answered. Mom walked to the dessert table, lifted the sheet cake that read, Merry Christmas 4th Battalion Families in red and green frosting, returned to Dad, and dumped the entire thing on his dress blues. The frosting hit his medals with a wet splat that made Katie gasp behind me. Red and green icing ran down Dad's chest onto his shiny shoes while chunks of yellow cake clung to his ribbons. The room froze. 300 people watching cake slide off Major David Wilson's dress blues onto the waxed floor of the Fort Carson Community Center. Colonel Miller shoved through the crowd, stopped in front of Dad, his face purple. He didn't look at Mom, just stared at the mess on Dad's uniform and said quietly that Dad had better be in his office at 600. Then he turned and walked out. That's when the whispering started. Mom stood there maybe 5 more seconds, watching frosting pool around Dad's feet, then headed for the door. I grabbed Katie's hand and Sarah took her other one, and we followed Mom out while the whole battalion watched. The cold in the parking lot hit hard. Mom's hands shook so badly she couldn't get the keys from her purse. Tommy took them and unlocked the minivan. He helped her into the passenger seat, then climbed behind the wheel, even though he only had a learner's permit. Sarah got in the back with Katie, who kept asking why Mommy threw cake at Daddy. Mom stared out at the mountains while Tommy drove home. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The house felt different when we walked in. Mom's retirement party decorations were still up from earlier. The banner saying, "Finally Home," hung across the living room. The photo album she'd made sat open on the kitchen table. Tommy helped her into a chair while Sarah took Katie upstairs. Mom picked up the album and stared at a photo of herself pregnant with Tommy at Fort Bragg. She looked so young. After a long time, she typed something on her phone. Over her shoulder, I saw she'd texted Aunt Margaret 2 words. I need you. Then she set the phone down and kept looking at that album. We stayed up with her past midnight, but Dad never came home. Mom couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the garage door and saw her car backing out. I followed. She drove back to the community center, and Dad's car was still there in the same spot. 3 spaces over sat Captain Brooks's red Honda Civic. Mom waited a minute, then took photos of both cars. The timestamp said 2:17 a.m. She drove home and made coffee. At exactly 7 a.m., we heard Dad's key in the lock. He walked in still, wearing the cake-crusted dress blues from the night before. Mom sat at the kitchen table with her coffee. Dad looked at her and said she'd destroyed his career. That Miller was considering Article 15, that she'd humiliated him in front of his entire command. Mom set down her mug and said one word: divorce. Dad actually laughed. He said she had no idea what she was starting and that he knew every JAG lawyer on base. Then he went upstairs and packed a bag. After he left, Mom called base legal assistance. The paralegal said they couldn't help. Conflict of interest since Dad was military too, but whispered that Mom should find a civilian. Attorney fast because Dad had already called trying to freeze their bank accounts. Mom hung up and went to the garage. That's where Tommy found her an hour later, surrounded by the boxes she'd labeled for the retirement move to Colorado. She was crying. Tommy sat next to her and pulled out his phone. Someone had posted a video of the cake incident on TikTok. It already had 50,000 views. The comments were all on Mom's side. He put an arm around her and said everyone supported her. That's when she really broke down. Margaret arrived that afternoon. One look at Mom and she took charge. She'd brought her Denver divorce attorney's card and $5,000 cash. She said Dad didn't know about their mother's inheritance money she'd been managing for Mom all these years. Mom just nodded. 2 days later, Dad came back for his things. Brooks waited in her car in our driveway while Dad walked through the house filling boxes. He announced he was moving into the BOQ on base. He wanted the kids every other weekend immediately. Katie ran to him and hugged his leg, but Tommy and Sarah stayed in the kitchen, refusing to look at him. After he left, Mom met with the attorney. Margaret recommended Jennifer Martinez, who specialized in military divorces. Her first question was whether Dad had been hiding money. She explained re-enlistment bonuses for 20-year majors were typically $45,000. Mom checked every account she could access. The money was nowhere. The next morning, an official envelope from base housing arrived at our door. I still wonder how Mom tracked exactly 217 photos out of 4,000. Did she sit there counting on all those lonely nights? The sound that frosting made hitting his metals must have been so specific. I also wonder if anyone recorded it before that TikTok. And how did Margaret know to bring precisely $5,000 in cash? She opened the official envelope on the porch and her hand started shaking. Dad had removed her as an authorized resident 3 days earlier. She had 30 days to vacate. The letter stated that only service members and listed dependents could live in military housing. Her name wasn't on the list anymore. She walked inside and found Tommy at the table working on calculus. He looked up with dark circles under his eyes. He'd been staying up late with Katie during her nightmares while Mom dealt with lawyers and paperwork. 17 years old, and he was stepping into the role she should have had to shoulder alone. Mom sat next to him, and he pushed aside his homework. He told her he'd been handling things so she could focus on the divorce. Said he knew she had to fight Dad, but the girls needed steady ground right now. Then Sarah came downstairs with a beat-up purple notebook. She sat across from them and opened to the first page. December 15, 2014, it read, "Dad missed my piano recital for an optional training exercise." She flipped through page after page. Every missed birthday, school play, parent-teacher conference, 6 years of notes. She slid it across and said she knew Mom would need it someday. The phone rang before Mom could respond. It was Janet Morrison, the FRG president. They needed to talk about Mom's role as volunteer coordinator. Half the spouses wanted her out after the Christmas party blow-up. The other half said they'd quit if she was forced out. Janet's voice dropped. David was calling people, saying Mom was having a mental breakdown and shouldn't be around families. Janet didn't buy it, but some senior officers' wives were listening. Mom thanked her and hung up. 2 hours later, the elementary school called about an emergency. Mom got there to find David in the principal's office with a stack of forms, trying to remove her from Katie's authorized pickup list and change emergency contacts to just himself and Brooks. The principal, Mrs. Wright, refused to make changes without Mom's written consent. When Mom walked in, David stood and started shouting about parental alienation, accused her of poisoning the kids and keeping them from him. He grabbed Mom's arm, and Mrs. Wright called security. 2 guards escorted him out while he yelled about his rights. The principal apologized and assured Mom nothing would change without her consent. That afternoon, Jennifer called with news from the subpoenaed financial records. She'd found the re-enlistment bonus, all $45,000, sitting in an account David had opened at a credit union off base 3 months earlier. Only his name on it. And worse, charges stretched back 6 months. Jewelry at the mall, hotel rooms at the Broadmoor, pricey dinners at restaurants Mom had never been to. The affair had started well before the re-enlistment. He'd been setting this up for half a year. The next morning, Margaret drove Mom to a therapist who specializes in military spouse trauma. Dr. Patricia Reeves had a small office near base. Mom sat in the beige waiting room for 10 minutes until she was called in. At first, she couldn't speak. 20 years of weight lodged in her throat. The therapist didn't rush her. Then Mom started, about the first deployment when she was 22 and pregnant and alone. The second when Tommy was a baby and she had mastitis with no help. The moves, the lost friends, the stalled careers. Dr. Reeves listened to all of it. At the end, she handed Mom a yellow legal pad and said to document everything from now on. Every interaction with David, every threat, every attempt to manipulate the kids. It would matter in court. On Thursday, Tommy had basketball practice. When Mom picked him up, Coach Williams, retired sergeant major, pulled her aside. David had called trying to remove her from Tommy's pickup authorization list there too. Coach said he told Major Wilson exactly where he could shove it. He said Tommy was a good kid who didn't need this drama, and he'd make sure Mom could always pick him up. A small win, but Mom needed it. Back home, Mom checked the mail since David hadn't come by in days. Hidden behind the water bill were credit card statements, 3 different cards she didn't know existed, with $30,000 in recent charges. She went line by line: a $1,200 Tiffany bracelet, monthly payments on an off-base apartment lease, furniture from Ashley Home Store. He'd been building a whole new life with Brooks using cards in both their names. Her credit was wrecked, and she'd had no idea. Katie found her crying over the statements, climbed into her lap, and asked if Daddy didn't love them anymore. Mom held her tight, searching for the right words. She told Katie Daddy loved her, but sometimes adults make choices that hurt people. Katie looked up with big brown eyes and said she knew. It was like when he promised to come to her spring play, but went to work instead, or when he said he'd teach her to ride a bike and never did. Even our 8-year-old had figured it out. 2 days before Christmas, Chaplain Morrison from the battalion came by. Not officially, he said, just as a concerned friend. He sat in the living room and told Mom several senior NCO wives had come to him about David and Brooks. They'd seen them at restaurants, at movies, even a hotel in Denver 6 months ago. He couldn't take sides in a divorce, but he suggested Mom request David's deployment records from personnel. There might be discrepancies between his official travel and where he actually was. He gave her the form number and the office. Mom spent the next 2 days at personnel filling out forms and waiting for records to print. The clerk kept shooting looks like she knew exactly what Mom was digging for. December 21st, Mom needed groceries and braved the commissary, even though weekends were a zoo. She was grabbing milk when she saw Captain Brooks at the deli counter. Brooks turned to reach for something and Mom saw it, Grandma's antique sapphire ring on her right hand. The one that went missing during our move from Germany 3 years ago. The one Mom filed an insurance claim for. The one she cried over because it was supposed to go to Sarah. Brooks caught Mom staring and actually smirked. She knew Mom couldn't prove anything without making another scene. Mom walked out, leaving her cart. From the parking lot, she called Jennifer and told her to file immediately. Jennifer had been waiting for the go-ahead and said Major would be served in his office the next morning. Mom knew it would blow everything up, but she was done being careful. December 23rd, Mom parked across from Base Legal at 900 and watched the process server go in with the papers. 20 minutes later, Major came storming out holding the envelope. He looked straight at Mom's car. She didn't look away. His face shifted from confused to furious when he realized she was watching. He started toward her, but his phone rang and he stopped to answer. Probably his lawyer. Mom drove home and found Margaret already there with boxes. They started with the bedroom, and that's where they found them. Love letters from Brooks tucked inside his field manuals, dated from his last deployment when Mom was sending weekly care packages. Brooks wrote about their future while Mom wrote about Tommy's grades and Sarah's dance recital. Margaret held Mom while she vomited in the bathroom. Christmas Eve, Mom tried to keep things normal. They were decorating cookies when the doorbell rang at 11 p.m. Major was drunk, yelling that he was taking the kids for Christmas morning. Tommy hit record on his phone while Margaret called the MPs. Major screamed that Mom had ruined his career and his life. The kids watched from the stairs as the MPs cuffed him and led him to the patrol car. Katie cried. Sarah froze. The arrest. Report would help Mom's case, but seeing her kids watch their father like that broke something in her. December 26th. The colonel called personally. Major's security clearance was under review after the arrest. He mentioned the family care plans Major had filed during deployments, suggested Mom request copies because there were interesting inconsistencies about listed emergency contacts. Jennifer scheduled Brooks's deposition for the 27th. Brooks arrived thinking she'd help Major. But when Jennifer showed her photos from family events on the same dates Brooks claimed they were together, her story shifted. She admitted the affair, but claimed Major said he and Mom were separated. When she saw last year's family Christmas cards, she went pale. Her testimony became some of Mom's strongest evidence. December 28th, Tommy asked to talk alone. He opened his laptop and played audio files. He'd been recording Major's calls to the house for months using an app. He said he got worried after seeing how Major acted during his last visit. The recordings captured Major talking to someone named Marcus Bradley about moving money around. Tommy had 43 recordings in total. Mom hugged him and said he shouldn't have had to do that, but she was proud of him for protecting the family. I'm still floored that Sarah kept that notebook for 6 years, marking every time Dad skipped something important. That's serious dedication for a 10-year-old to start. How did she know way back then she'd need proof someday? Jennifer ran Marcus Bradley's name and discovered he'd been helping major funnel deployment pay into crypto wallets Mom didn't know existed. The digital wallet held $75,000 that should have been in their savings, combat pay and reenlistment money Mom thought went to bills. Jennifer added financial fraud to the divorce filing,